Good morning. It's Tuesday, January 28th. Time for a daily reflection. This reflection has been formulating in my brain for a couple of days, maybe a week now. It started with a conversation with a neighbor who was lamenting the unfairness of it all. In fact, that was her phrase. It's just not fair. I'd been listening to her complain, and rightly so, about how unfair it was that they, I think that means the governor, shut down places. And that some places were closed and others seemed willing to violate the law and remain open. We were talking about the frustration of not being able to listen to live music. And I know that there are musicians, Chris, Rhythm Method 4 are examples, who are also frustrated by this unfairness, and that some places remain open and others don't. Life isn't fair. I thought about it also as I heard the news report of a church in our area who was going to stay open for in-person worship, and they expected their 300 members on a Sunday morning to be there. I don't know what their cleaning process is like. I don't know what their social, physical distancing is like. I just thought, it's unfair. You're going to be open, and we're going to keep by abiding by the rule and not having in-person worship gatherings. It's not fair. But then I also remembered some sage a long time ago telling me, life is not fair. And it isn't. I think of that especially when I think of my tyrannical parents. They were the worst. So Alex, if you're listening to this, please know that your mother and I were not as bad as your grandparents were. Here's part of that tyrannical story. I'm sure it was elementary school, probably 4th, 5th grade, somewhere in that neighborhood. I was getting much better at my bike riding. My friends and I would take off and ride. Well, my parents set boundaries. There were 2 roads that we were not allowed to cross. 2 roads, so if you lived in the area of Vacaville, think of Peabody Road, but think of it in terms of half the size. The roads were only 1 lane each direction, but heavily trafficked. I suspect that because they were afraid, my parents set those boundaries and said, go there and no further. Well, for one of those roads, it didn't matter to me. But as we headed off on our bike rides, the road that I lived on dead-ended into a wooded area, which had an incredible trail to ride. It was perfect for us. There were little bumps and ravines that we could jump over, and the bumps would help us get air under our tires. Now, the problem was that trail dead-ended also at the other road. That's fine. We could ride there and ride back. But on the exact opposite side of the road where the trail dead ended sat Nirvana, heaven. It was a mom and pop convenience store, kind of like 7-Eleven before they became 7-Elevens. And in this place, you could buy all of the important things: soda, candy, Hostess snowballs, Ho-Hos, and Twinkies, or ice cream for those people who think they needed that, as well as Topps baseball cards during certain months of the year. Those baseball cards, 10 in a packet, were valuable. They were gold. I collected them. I traded them. I gambled with them. And the really worthless ones, the ones from the New York Yankees, they were put for the spokes of my back wheel so that when I rode, the bike would go and make good noise. I recall having 2 simultaneous thoughts that one fateful summer. In the past, I had given my quarters to my friend Scott to go on the other side of the road and buy me my baseball cards. And every once in a while, I gave him more money to buy me a soda and either snowballs or ho-hos. Scott's parents were the kindest ones in the world. They were cool. They let him, same age as me, go across that road. So back to that summer and those fateful thoughts. It's not fair that I can't go across the street. I know how to do it carefully. Scott can. It's all because he has cool parents and I have mean ones. And one day I thought, nope, I'm going to cross the street. Now, I could have ridden the bicycle about a quarter mile down the road on the side and crossed at the traffic light with a crossing, but no. If I'm going to break the rules, I'm going to break the rules. And so I did. We waited for the traffic to pause, and then me, Scott, and the rest of us rode across the street. We arrived at Nirvana. I bought my baseball cards. I bought my soda. I bought my snack. We rode back across the streets. And there we sat in the woods, in our spot, drinking and eating and evaluating our cards. It was a great day. And for those of you who remember Topps baseball cards back in the last century, it also came with this little surprise, which is maybe what we were buying it for. This piece of awful plastic-like chewing gum, but it was great on the day. So now, after finishing all of our snacks, after evaluating our baseball cards, and I suspect trading some around among ourselves, we all headed back home. I was elated. I had crossed the street. I had survived crossing the boundary, the forbidden boundary. I had survived. I had thrived. And now it was the ride home, feeling all good and wonderful. Life was fair once more. I could do what I wanted with no problems. And so we headed back on the path. And at the last jump, just before our street started, I took that last one, but this time the bike went a little bit sideways. And as I came down, the bike went out from underneath me, my right knee hit the ground, and I got back up and rode because it had happened before, no big deal. It wasn't until I got home, had put the bike in the garage, and even had walked into the house that I began to realize something was wrong. I realized it when my mother went, "Oh, what happened to your knee? It's bleeding." I then knew something was indeed wrong. She took a look at it, and sure enough, the cut was too deep for just a Band-Aid to hold it. So we wrapped it up in probably a towel and drove over to Dr. Dubin's office. Ah, the good Dr. D. Put me up on the table, looked at my knee and asked, "How did this happen?" And of course I told him, well, I was riding in the woods, and as I normally do, I took that last jump, but this time I didn't land properly, and I fell on my knee. And he said, okay. He looked and he found a little sliver of glass in the wound and pulled it out. And then properly told me that, well, we'll stitch it up 5 stitches later, and a tetanus booster shot. I was walking out the door. It suspended bike riding for a while. You can't bend the knee while the stitches are healing the wound. So for about 2 weeks, I hobbled along, being very jealous of my friends heading off to the store, to Nirvana. Fortunately, Scott was a good enough friend that he'd take my quarters and go buy me baseball cards. And then that 2-week period had ended. Dr. Dubin said on evaluating my knee, yeah, it's healed. We've taken the stitches out. You can go back to riding. And I was all set. It was a Saturday. Scott and the crew stopped by and we were grabbing our bikes when Scott asked, "So, it's all healed even after that fall, after we'd been to the store?" You don't say that in front of my father. He also then asked the question, which I've been contemplating as well for a couple of weeks now. Do you think God was punishing you for crossing the street and breaking your parents' rules? In front of my father, you're going to ask that question? Well, guess what? We knew the rules. Break the rule, cross that street, do something inappropriate with your bicycle, and you lose it for a week. Second offense was 2 weeks. Third offense was a month. You didn't want to talk about a fourth offense. None of us ever got there. So remember, 2 weeks I've been hobbling, not been able to ride the bike. Scott makes this stupid statement in front of my parents, my father, who then turns and looks at me and he says, 2 weeks, no bike riding. Second offense. Life is not fair. 4 weeks of isolation and watching as my friends headed off on their daily rides. 4 weeks of sitting at home as Scott and the crew went to Dramana, got soda, candy, and baseball cards. 4 lousy weeks of forking over my quarters so that he could buy me those golden cards. It was so unfair. Then again, life is unfair at times. Although, if the worst I ever get is 5 stitches and a shot, I'll take it. I currently live with more anxiety about being asymptomatic and not knowing it. I'm more concerned with spreading this COVID-19, or worse, getting it. I think I'm healthy enough to fight it off. But then I listen to stories like Art Howe, a former baseball player and manager, and how debilitating COVID-19 was for him. And I suspect he's probably in better shape than I am. Life is unfair. And for crying out loud, I've become my parents. This is the boundary we will go and no further. And if we do, there's a penalty to be had. It's not 5 stitches and a booster shot. It's anxiety and fear that we might get really sick, that something would happen. It's really hard not seeing you all on Sundays. It's really hard keeping on this side of that boundary road and not greeting one another under the portico, shaking hands, embracing, laughing with one another, being close, singing loud, talking in my normal outside voice. It's really hard not to worry. It's really unfair that the Scots in the world cross the temporary road and boundary to have a nirvana moment. It's not fair. But nonetheless, I will look forward to seeing you on Facebook or YouTube on Sundays. I will look forward to that moment when this COVID-19 is contained, even if it's a long time away. I'll try to stay on this side of the road, this side of the boundary. I may rail, but I'll do it because I love, I care, and I don't want to get sick or give it to somebody else. So, see you Sunday in worship on Facebook or YouTube. In the meantime, please wash your hands repeatedly, 20 seconds a time, a couple of times a day, please. Wear masks when you go out, because it's really about protecting others. Practice that physical distancing, even if it hurts. And of course, according to Sergeant Esterhaus, let's be careful out there.